nurse touched my arm so gently that at first I thought she was just trying to get past me in the hallway. But then she leaned in close enough that I could smell the faint coffee on her breath, and she whispered, "Mrs. Alderman, please be careful with those people." I turned to look at her. She was already walking away, her sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum floor, her head down like she'd said nothing at all. Those people. My son's fiancée's family. I stood there in the corridor of St. Anne's Medical Center holding a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, and I felt something cold move through me. Not fear, exactly. Something quieter than fear. The kind of feeling you get when a door closes in a house and you realize you're not sure who closed it. I'd come to the hospital that Tuesday morning because my son had called me the night before and his voice sounded wrong. Not sick, wrong. Tired, wrong. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. He'd been working double shifts at the distribution warehouse for 3 months straight, and every time I asked him why, he just said they were saving up for the wedding, building a cushion, getting ahead. My son's name is Adam. He's 31 years old. He has his father's eyes and his grandmother's stubbornness and a laugh that fills up whatever room he's standing in. He had that laugh anyway. I hadn't heard it in a while. I'd driven 40 minutes from my house in Glendale, Ohio, to bring him lunch and check on him the way mothers do. He'd texted me that he was stopping by the hospital on his way to work. Renee, his fiancée, had a routine check-in with her doctor, and he wanted to be there. I told him I'd meet him in the lobby, bring sandwiches. I never thought anything of it. I didn't think anything of the nurse either, at first. I assumed maybe she had the wrong person. I assumed I'd misheard. But I hadn't misheard, and she hadn't had the wrong person. I found Adam in the waiting room near the elevators. He stood up when he saw me, and I noticed it immediately, the way his jacket hung loose on his shoulders, the circles under his eyes that were darker than the last time I'd seen him, 3 weeks before. 3 weeks isn't long. It felt long. We hugged. He took the bag from me and said thank you, that I didn't have to do this. Of course I did, I told him. We sat down and he ate half a sandwich and I watched him the way I used to watch him when he was small and coming down with something, that quiet inventory a mother keeps, cataloging what's changed, what's wrong, what she doesn't know yet. "How's the job?" I asked. "Fine," he said. "Good." "You look tired, sweetheart." He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that's really just a face. "I'm okay, Mom. We're getting close. A few more months." "Close to what?" He paused. "Our goal for the wedding fund." I nodded. I didn't push. I've learned in 63 years of living and 31 years of being Adam's mother that pushing at the wrong moment accomplishes nothing. You have to wait for the door to open on its own. Renee came out about 20 minutes later. She was pretty in the way that reads well in photographs. Carefully put together, always the right earrings, always the right smile. She'd been part of our lives for almost 2 years by then. The engagement was official for 8 months. I had tried, genuinely tried, to love her the way you love a child your child has chosen. I did love her. I just didn't entirely trust her. And I had never been able to say exactly why until that nurse stopped me in the hallway. "Susan," Renee said, wrapping her arms around me. She always called me Susan, never Mom, which I respected. "This is such a nice surprise." We chatted for a few minutes. She told me the check-in went fine, everything looked good. Her mother had been texting her during the appointment, she said, laughing, holding up her phone to show the string of messages. Her mother texted constantly. That was one thing about the Harlows. Renee's family, they were always present. They were at every dinner, every holiday, every casual Sunday gathering. Renee's father, Douglas Harlow, called Adam son before they were even engaged. At the time, I thought that was warmth, community, a family that opens its arms. I understand now that there are different reasons a person might keep you close. I drove home thinking about the nurse. I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Almost. I went back to the hospital the next morning. I'm not sure I can fully explain what made me do it. 63 years of instinct, maybe. Or just the memory of Adam's jacket hanging loose on his shoulders and the sandwich he only ate half of. I told myself I was just going to ask one question. Politely. She was at the nurse's station on the 3rd floor when I found her. Her name badge said Wendy. She was about 40, brown hair pulled back, the kind of woman who has seen enough that she doesn't waste words. She looked up and I could see her calculating whether this was a mistake. "You spoke to me yesterday," I said, "in the hallway." She glanced down the corridor. "I shouldn't have." "But you did," I said, "and I'm asking you to tell me why." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, quietly, without looking at me, "I've worked here for 11 years. I see a lot of families come through, and sometimes you see things you're not supposed to comment on." She paused. "Your son comes in here and he looks worse every time. And the family he's marrying into, I've heard them talk when they don't think anyone's listening." "Talk about what?" She shook her head just slightly. "I've already said too much. I'm sorry." She went back to her computer. "Just pay attention. That's all I'm saying. Pay attention." I paid attention. I started small. I asked Adam to lunch the following Saturday, and I listened differently than I had before. Not for what he said, but for the shape of what he didn't say. When I asked about the wedding budget, he shifted in his seat. When I mentioned that planning a wedding while working doubles must be exhausting, he said it's fine, so quickly it was almost a reflex. I asked gently how the finances were working out. Who was paying for what? He was quiet for a moment. "Renee's parents are covering some of it," he said. "The venue, the catering. That's generous of them." "Yeah." He moved his fork around his plate. "We're contributing our share too, though. We want to." "Of course," I said. I didn't ask anything else that day. But afterward I drove by the Harlow's house. I don't know why. I just needed to see it. It was a large colonial on a cul-de-sac in Worthington. Stone facade, 3-car garage, a landscaped front yard that didn't have a single dead plant. Douglas Harlow was a retired financial consultant, his wife Patricia. I am not using her real last name here. The Harlow name is one I've changed. Had worked in real estate for decades. They had money, real money, the kind that owns things. So why was my son working double shifts to contribute his share to a wedding at a venue the Harlows had supposedly already covered? I sat outside that house for 10 minutes and then I drove away, and I felt sick. I called my sister that evening. She lives in Dayton and she is the most practical person I have ever known. I told her everything, the nurse, the loose jacket, the way Adam talked about money, the house in Worthington with the manicured yard. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Susan," she said, "you need to know more before you do anything." She was right. I did. Here is what I found out over the following 3 weeks, piece by piece, through conversations with Adam's old college roommate, through a phone call with a woman I found through a mutual acquaintance, and through one long, devastating conversation with my son. Douglas Harlow had approached Adam about 6 months into the relationship with an investment opportunity, a private fund he managed for close family and longtime friends. Limited entry, high returns, nothing complicated, just a way to start building real wealth early for a young couple. He made it sound like a gift, an invitation into the family's financial world. Adam had invested his savings, his entire savings, $42,000 he put aside over 7 years of careful living, never touching it, the way his father and I had taught him. He put it into Douglas Harlow's private fund. Douglas Harlow had done this before. The woman I spoke to, a friend of a friend whose family had also been close with the Harlows years ago, told me her brother had invested too. A different amount, a different year. The fund had restructured, and the money had never fully come back. They'd received excuses, partial repayments, promises of returns that never materialized. I sat in my kitchen on a Tuesday night in November, and I read the text messages. Adam finally, reluctantly, showed me 2 full years of gentle pressure from Douglas, reassurances that the fund was performing, delays explained by market timing, small partial returns that were just enough to keep Adam from asking harder questions. My son's hands were shaking while I read them. He was 31 years old and he was sitting at my kitchen table looking like he had at 7 when he'd broken something valuable and didn't know how to tell me. "I didn't want to worry you," he said. "Adam," I said. I set the phone down on the table. "How long have you known?" He looked at the wall. "I started asking questions a few months ago. He kept saying it was fine. Market volatility. Temporary." He exhaled. "I don't think it's coming back." I want to tell you that I stayed calm. I want to tell you I was a reasonable, measured woman in that moment. I was not. I put my hand over my mouth and stared at the space above his head and felt a rage so complete and so cold that I couldn't speak for almost a full minute. Then I asked him if Renee knew. He shook his head. "I don't think so. I think she thinks everything is normal." That was the thing I had to decide. Was I right about that, or was Renee part of it? I thought about the nurse. I thought about what she'd said. I've heard them talk, not just Douglas. Them. I didn't confront Adam about it that night. I told him we would figure it out. I told him I loved him. I sent him home and I sat at that kitchen table for a very long time. I reached out to a family attorney the next morning. A woman named, and I am changing this name too for privacy, someone I will call my attorney. She had handled estate matters for my family when my husband passed, and I trusted her completely. I told her everything and asked her what we were dealing with. She said it sounded like a classic affinity fraud scheme. She'd seen versions of it before, someone who cultivates closeness with a family group, then leverages that trust to solicit investment. The small partial repayments are textbook, she said. They're designed to prevent victims from complaining long enough for the operator to move on or restructure. "Has Adam filed anything?" she asked. "No," I said. "He needs to document everything, every communication, amounts, dates, and he should file a complaint with the Ohio Division of Securities." She also told me something that I have thought about every day since. Don't confront them without documentation. Once they know you know, the money becomes much harder to recover. So I helped Adam build the file. It took 2 weeks. We went through everything: bank transfers, email chains, texts, a written summary of every verbal conversation he could remember. My attorney reviewed it. She said it was solid. She made the calls she needed to make. In the 3rd week of December, a certified letter went to Douglas Harlow's address in Worthington. My attorney had made it plain. The documented communications would be submitted to the Ohio Division of Securities, and if necessary, to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, unless the funds were returned in full within 30 days. I want to tell you that Douglas Harlow called me and apologized. He didn't. He called a mutual acquaintance and made noises about how this was a misunderstanding, how family doesn't sue family, how we should sit down and talk about it over dinner. I want to tell you I wasn't tempted. I almost was, because part of me still wanted to believe that some version of this family was real, that the Sunday dinners had meant something, that Renee was not her father's daughter in the way that counted. I did not go to dinner. 30 days passed. On the 28th day, the transfer came through. All $42,000 plus the 3% my attorney had specified as partial compensation for documented losses in income and opportunity. Adam called me when he saw it hit his account. He was standing in his apartment parking lot and he cried. I sat in my living room and listened to my son cry, and I cried too, quietly, with the phone pressed to my ear, not saying anything, just staying there. The engagement ended 2 weeks after that. I don't know exactly what was said between Adam and Renee. He told me only that he'd told her the full truth about what her father had done, and that her response had told him everything he needed to know. He came over for Christmas. He brought a bottle of Cabernet. I will never drink because I want to keep it. He sat on my couch and watched the game and fell asleep during the 3rd quarter the way he used to when he was home from college. And I sat in the armchair across the room and watched him sleep. He looked less tired. The jacket fit again. I don't know what happened to Douglas Harlow after that. My attorney says the Division of Security's investigation was ongoing as of when she last checked. I know that the family is still in that house in Worthington with the 3-car garage and the landscaped yard. I know that we were not the only family. The woman in Dayton, the one who told me about her brother, she reached out to my attorney too, once she knew what we'd done. I think about Wendy sometimes, the nurse. I went back to St. Anne's once, a few months later, and I stopped at the 3rd floor station. A different nurse was there. I asked if Wendy still worked that floor. She said Wendy had transferred to a different department. I left a note for her at the front desk. I don't know if she got it. It just said, "Thank you for paying attention. You helped me pay attention too." That's the thing I keep coming back to, not the money. We got the money back, and money, in the end, is just money. What I come back to is how close we came to losing more than that. Another year of Adam working doubles and telling me he was fine. Another year of dinners with a family that was watching him the way a fisherman watches a line. I trusted my instinct. I trusted a stranger's whisper in a hospital hallway. I trusted my son enough to ask him the hard question and wait for the real answer. He's doing well now. He's sleeping. He's eating. He called me last Sunday just to talk. No reason, the way he used to. And at one point he said something that made him laugh. His real laugh, the one that fills up whatever room he's standing in. I sat in my kitchen with the phone to my ear and that laugh coming through it, and I thought, there it is. There he is. Some things you protect with lawyers and documentation and certified letters, and some things you protect just by paying attention before it gets that far. I learned that it is never too late to start paying attention. I still think about the moment Adam sat at my kitchen table and showed me those text messages. His hands were shaking, not because he was afraid of me, but because he'd been carrying something alone for months, and the weight of it had finally gotten too heavy to hold by himself. That's the part that stays with me, not the money. Not Douglas Harlow and his private fund and his colonial house in Worthington. What stays with me is how long my son tried to protect me from the truth, while that same truth was slowly hollowing him out. I've thought a lot about why things unfolded the way they did, and I don't think it was luck. I think Douglas Harlow was the kind of man who had done this before and would have done it again. And what stopped him this time wasn't fate or chance. It was a nurse who chose to speak when she could have stayed quiet. It was a mother who chose to listen instead of dismiss. And it was a son who, when finally asked the right question in the right way, chose honesty over pride. 3 choices, 3 moments where someone decided to do the harder, more honest thing, and each one made the next one possible. I've lived long enough to know that most harm doesn't announce itself. It arrives wearing warmth. It calls your son's son before the ring is even on the finger. It invites you to Sunday dinners and makes you feel like family, because feeling like family is exactly what it needs you to feel. The cruelty in what Douglas did wasn't just financial. It was that he understood people. He understood that trust is the thing you can't get back once you've spent it. And he spent Adam's trust carefully over years, in small enough amounts that it never triggered the alarm. What protected us in the end wasn't suspicion. It was clarity. My attorney told me once, during those weeks we were building the file, that the people who recover from this kind of thing are almost always the ones who slow down and think before they react, not the ones who act out of anger, not the ones who confront before they're ready. The ones who do the quiet, unglamorous work of documenting, verifying, and building something that holds up. That took something from Adam, too. It took courage to sit across from Renee and tell her the truth about her own father. I don't know exactly what she said back. He never told me in detail, and I never pushed. But I know what it costs a person to have that conversation, to choose honesty over the easier version of events. To say the thing that ends something even when you're not sure you're ready for it to end. He paid that cost, and I think he's better for it, not because it was easy, but because it was right. I'm 63 years old. I've made my share of mistakes. I've trusted people I shouldn't have and doubted people I should have believed. What I've learned, slowly, sometimes painfully, is that the only real protection any of us has is the combination of a good heart, a clear head, and the willingness to keep going when the ground feels uncertain. You need all three. A good heart without a clear head gets taken advantage of. A clear head without the willingness to act just watches things fall apart. And neither one means much if you give up the moment it gets hard. Adam is sleeping well now. He called me last Sunday just to talk. That's the whole story, right there.